All things continually lead back to serpents, dragons, fairies, Nephilim, and fallen angels.
In the distance looms a mystical mountain.
As Mike Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
At its peak, a great fire burns, concealing the Prometheus lens.
This development of this knowledge that's being talked about within the mystery schools.
An ancient artifact said to reveal the hidden truth within a deliberately darkened world.
There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
The Smithsonian, they caught wind of a giant skeleton. They would send their agents out to get it.
But it takes courage to move forward, to move out of the shadows, out of the unreality that we think of as reality.
We are all on the hero's journey.
Mankind has been in contact with and influenced by extraterrestrials.
Leave the Sitchin mound of bull feathers out of it.
You know, look at it from a different perspective. A different perspective. Different perspective.
What's happening? What is up? Hold out your glass, because we're going to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. I'm your host, Justin. Here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus lens to take a second look at everything. Welcome back. This is the third session of our series with the Enuma Elish, with the man, the myth, the legend, the Jedi himself. Dr. Judd, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Justin.
Oh, yeah. This has been a really great study, and I really appreciate your time sitting down with me and going through this, because
yeah,
these are very fascinating subjects, so it's really great to have a scholarly guide along with me on this journey.
Hey, I'm happy to do it because it's good for me to revisit this material, you know, from time to time. Particularly because it's so important, really, for, like we talked about in the last couple of episodes, the genesis of really biblical studies and biblical archaeology.
And also, too, just like, you know, with Christians, because all this stuff is, you know, kind of interwoven and interlinked. And I found that a lot of Christians just don't dive into this material. And, we're commanded to be knowledgeable and be able to give accounts for the faith that we have. So these discussions are important.
And if people have trepidation about that, I would encourage them to look at people like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know, in the context that they're at. I mean, they're in Babylon. They're basically, you know, recruited into the court retinue of Nebuchadnezzar II, and he trains them. You know, they study all of the literature we're talking about here. So they basically become experts in Mesopotamian culture and languages and mythology and religion, of course, without committing, you know, to those pagan traditions. And so they become versed in so over the years. I say that just to say that if people have pause about that, any time that I've had pause about it, you know, in decades past, you know, consider Daniel and his comrades, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, serving, you know, in the court of Nebuchadnezzar II, yet maintaining their own loyalty and faith to Yahweh through all of that.
Yeah. Yes, I agree completely. And then also, too, they were trained, you know, they were known as, you know, magi.
Magi, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They studied the stars, and God spoke to those people through their looking at the stars and mapping the stars and these traditions and things. So that was revealing of the Messiah.
I was just about to say that, to bring it to ground. The whole reason that the later generations of Magi even knew about that is because of the Babylonian captivity and the fact that Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were there to introduce that that school of Mesopotamian philosophers and scholars to the Old Testament, essentially, and the prophecies about the Messiah. And so you've got these two traditions, that are basically not compromisingly interwoven, but interwoven nonetheless, so that those later generations of Magi will recognize that, when Nibiru swings around, not the fake Nibiru, the Sitchin Planet X Nibiru, but Jupiter, when it swings around and makes this celestial event, that was the sign and timing that they were looking for.
Yeah, because that was the king planet, right?
King planet, Marduk star.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's get on in here. Last time we left you guys, we had closed out with the battle and him defeating Tiamat and taking all the other gods and stuff and her creations as captive. So we ended with we touched on 5, but there's lots of stuff in there that we're going to tie up some loose ends as we start this one. But let's see here. When we get there, it talks about all the creations and all the things that he done after his victory. But he said, concerning the high gods and concerning the stars, he placed constellations for each one and then established the year to set forth its subdivisions. So there, I assume that was, like the zodiacs, setting up the zodiac system. And then he assigned 3 stars to signify each of the 12 months. And, in modern astrology, we know that as the deacons. So, and then he set forth the station, just as you mentioned, Nibiru. And this was Jupiter. But he made all these stations for Enlil and Ea, but it divided them in hemispheres. And he divided them in 2, one, the north for Enlil and the south for Ea. And it says, while the equator ones was Anu. But I just thought this was amazing. Just this ancient tablet, having this precise of measurements and knowledge, and we're to believe these were just ancient knuckle dragging, stupid people. And that is totally not the case.
No, well, I mean, and there are two things really to consider there. And as modern people, the temptation is to, I was just talking about this morning on a posting, the temptation is to commit presentism, the capital crime of historiography, that is to basically project current cultural norms or values onto the past, and evolutionists are notorious for this, considering our forebears knuckle dragging idiots, just constantly caricaturing ancient and prehistoric peoples, when in fact, they had the same psychological equipment that we do. They were just as intelligent and inventive. The second thing to consider is the fact that they were also getting source material from divine sources, fallen divine sources, but divine sources nonetheless. And so these astronomical apportionments that show up in works like the Enuma Elish, and even some of the Second Temple period literature has this in it. Enoch has astronomical data. And another thing is that it is interesting here, and I don't want to harp on this too long, but it speaks to the preciseness, the precision and accuracy and depth of the development of these ancient sciences, that they were able to, once again, taking in both human intelligence and the outside information that's being given to them, this very sophisticated stuff. I mean, this is stuff that ancients and late prehistoric peoples extrapolated calculus and engineering from. So one of the things that it illustrates is that they understood that they were on a moving object, that it was a spheroid object, and that it had direct repercussions in terms of their relative position to those clusters of celestial bodies and stars and whatnot, which means that prehistoric and ancient peoples knew about something called procession, which I'm sure you've read about in the course of studying this material. And procession is the spinning, but particularly the spinning and the wobbling that the earth has, the axis of the earth has. And this often comes up in conversation in terms of the shape of the earth. And, you know, is the earth a globe? Is it flat? Some people will defer to the fact that that ancient peoples conceived of the world as flat. Well, that's cosmic geography. That's celestial geography. It's different than how they actually conceptualize the sky. Now you've got the melding of that in these two, in these two sources of information. But it clearly demonstrates that they understood procession, and that their ideas of a celestial heaven and earth were different than the more mundane conceptions of the earth.
And see, that's something, I mean, I've looked into these things, but I've been really like deep diving here recently. I have got the audio books of Graham Hancock.
Yeah.
And been listening to them. Mm-hmm. And, I know he's, not a Christian, but man, he is just beating all around the truth. He's just missing, some, in my opinion, just some key pieces. And he would have, the most holistic picture out of anybody that I've heard speak on these things.
I'm of an agreement with that because, and I think you and I may have talked about this, but I read Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods back when I was a long-haired hippie in college. When my second year in college, it came out, and I was a history major and a music major, but I instantly knew that this guy was asking questions that A, needed to be asked, and B, the general academic community was not asking. That there were questions here that were very relevant and pertinent to an accurate, or at least a more accurate understanding of the human past, and potentially what things culturally influenced the human civilization, human societies that may not have been indigenous to the earth. Now, again, Hancock is still basically a materialist, so he's not willing to come out and ascribe a supernatural identity to that agency, that outside influencing agency. But again, he's asking questions that need to be asked, and he takes a lot of flack from it. For it at conferences and things like that, and unfairly so. I think a lot of times academics and scholars forget that it's avocationals that also bring a lot to the table. People that are just as adept, they've done the 10,000 man hours. They've earned the authority. It makes me think of like Michael Ventris. This guy that was an architect. That was his trade. His avocation was ancient languages, and we wouldn't be able to understand Linear A Greek that the Minoans wrote in and spoke if it hadn't been for the work of Michael Ventris, this guy who was not an academic. And so, academics for the most part need to take a step back, because there are people out there who can make these significant contributions because they're thinking outside of the box.
Different perspective instead of eyes.
Different, fresh perspective, but I think you're right. He's just right there, dancing around the supernatural. He even acknowledges that there were these so-called culture heroes that he's talking about.
Oh yeah, the Viracocha and stuff.
The Viracocha, exactly. The feathered serpent, their features are very similar wherever they are, but these culture givers, if you look at that through a biblical lens, or even a Mesopotamian lens, you're talking about these seraphimic, reptilian skinned looking entities that are these cultural engineers, basically. We know them as watchers and seraphim, and in the case of Mesopotamia, the Apkallu, and to a degree the Anunnaki. But Graham Hancock is not willing to give them that agency, despite the fact that all of these ancient literatures and traditions speak to that very thing that he's interested in.
Yeah. Well, see, I've been listening to his stuff, though, and he keeps mentioning this Hamlet's Mill.
Hamlet's Mill. Right.
So I got that book just the other day, and I've been cracking that open, and he's talking about, the precession and the connection with the 70 and the 72. And we even see that in our biblical texts, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would, now that book is a commitment, as you no doubt are discovering. But it's one of those worthwhile books like Hancock's books because in the case of ancient mythology, the authors are making the case that very much like anthropologists in the golden age of that field made, that when they begin to study anthropology in kind of a laboratory setting where they had indigenous peoples like, the Kung Bushmen or the Trobriand Islanders in the South Pacific or Indians in the Andes, take your pick. They're studying people who are basically still living with a mythological mind. And so they articulate in their ethnographies things like, well, these aren't just fables to these people. They're functional components to their culture. And in fact, the
ways of explaining natural phenomena.
Exactly. In other words, they perform a lot of the same tasks intellectually that science, what we would call science, does. In fact, there's one anthropologist that I'm thinking about who really articulates it beautifully was Branislaw Malinowski. And he said that, he actually wrote a book called Magic, Science, and Religion, where he's saying, those lines that we draw between, the hard sciences and what might be considered, mythology or fancy or whatever, doesn't exist in the ancient world. And mythology, in fact, was kind of the ocean upon which those sciences floated, because in the examination in Hamlet's Mill, as you've no doubt discovered if you've gotten very far, the watching of the stars, which we're talking about here, was based on the identities and the interactions of the gods of these various cultures and societies, running the gamut of sophistication. And the very movements, and placement during different times of the years corresponded to, the panoply of mythological drama that existed in those traditions. And by watching the stars, they're able to extrapolate more sophisticated mathematics, and you develop calculus and engineering, and you're able to build, more sophisticated structures. And again, it's both the human intelligence aspect, and as believers, we can say there are these outside celestial influences that are giving this information, but it nonetheless illustrates the importance of mythology, the fundamental importance of mythology in the understanding of what we call science, what ancient and prehistoric peoples would not have intellectually compartmentalized.
Yeah, see, that's the thing with Hancock stuff, because I ordered that Hamlet's Mill, and I had to wait a little while for it to come. And I had just ordered like a big bunch. I ordered like 6 or 8 of Brian Forrester's books, because it was all on, the Peruvian and Bolivian culture. And I thought it was fascinating how he had made correlations with the path of Viracocha, and how that documented, story, history, mythology, whatever you want to label it, but all the cities that he said he went, and he had, these disciples with him called the Viracocha, and they performed miracles and taught the sacred sciences and all this stuff. But every single one of those places, that path is where you find all of your megalithic structure. And every single one of those places, they find elongated skulls.
Yeah, well, and I'm trying to remember, but I'm sure that places like Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman, all of those are going to be on those lists. when I did the work with Marzulli in Peru, that first time I went down, doing the anthropometry on the skulls, I could never say conclusively out of, let's say, the sampling of 40 that we had at that museum, that there was any skeletal morphology that made me think, that, I'm holding a Nephilim skull. But there were some that had anomalous morphology, like extra foramen and just weird,
sagittal suture on a few is missing.
Sagittal suture plating fusion, which, there are pathologies that can cause that, but then you start talking to, some of the native population there who maintain the oral tradition of these, like the Paracas and the Nazca culture mythology, about these bird men that came down and gave them their culture, about the reason that those skulls are elongated like that is because that's what their first kings looked like.
Yeah, they're imitating them.
And so the question that I kept asking LA the whole time there is like, what if they're doing this headboarding and head binding and cradle boarding, this cranial deformation, as a mark of emulation of the gods, their first god kings, what do these things look like? So, smoking gun, Nephilim skull find aside, which we would all love to have, it still speaks to the fact that they're preserving this tradition of their oldest god kings. And they're continuing in this very visible way, but it's not any different than, like the paper. I don't know if you read the paper that I wrote on the use of king words in Eurasia.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of cultural impact that these outside influences had, so that there's this huge 90-degree angle cultural change wherever it's felt. And of course, South America would be no exception to what they call the Viracochas, what Mesopotamians would have called the Apkallu, what Second Temple period
same story everywhere,
same thing.
Yeah. And that wasn't a rabbit trail, guys. All that's connected. That's what we're talking about, the passing down of the knowledge. Where did the knowledge come from? This is amazing stuff. But I guess treading forward, he talks about all these different signs and the moons, and it talks about the horns of the moon, talking about the crescent of the moon and all these different stages.
Yeah. Still another very potent preserved symbol, because the Greeks knew that symbol as the horns of Pan. Pan was often associated with Selene, the moon goddess, which is why and those analogs exist in older forms.
Hathor.
Yeah, exactly, precisely.
Ishtar. But as it was going down through there, I thought it was cool. This and this was in the footnotes of the book that I was reading, because this wasn't in the actual text. But when it talked about the cycles of the moon, it said the 15th day will be halfway at every month's midpoint. But in the notes, it said the Shabbatu, which is the same origin word as Sabbath. That's where we get that word from. But then it mentions Shamash. And we see Shamash, he's the sun deity. You see him in the epics of Gilgamesh and just all these old,
He's also dictating the code to Hammurabi on the Hammurabi stela. Yeah.
So he was very predominant god, all sun deities were.
Guys, what's up? Tom Dunn here from Through the Black. We have launched our new ministry outreach, No More Dead Babies, and the website is nomoredeadbabies.com. We want you to go to that website and get a free t-shirt, okay? We want you to join the movement, okay? We need soldiers to step up and say that they're going to be a voice for the voiceless, okay? Guys, we've never done anything like this before. This is a big deal, and I don't know who all is ready for it out there, but it's time to step up, okay? And we're asking you to go to the website and order the shirt. The shirt is free, but you got to pay for shipping, okay? We're going to ship it out to you as soon as we get it. You tell us what size you need, and then we're going to send you the t-shirt, okay? Join us. The goal is to get thousands of these shirts out. Keep pushing this. I think this boldness can be contagious.
Hey listeners, it's Nick from Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company. I want to invite you to try something new. Here at Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company, we have a bold and slow-roasted coffee that is 100% organic and ethically sourced. There are no pesticides or fungicides from the plantations we import our coffee from, and it's all single-sourced too. We have light, medium, and dark roast. Even decaf coffee as well to satisfy whatever kind of coffee you drink. We also have a variety of flavored coffees for you to try, including our hazelnut and apple pie flavored coffees, which are both big sellers. You can order our coffee at www.kevlarjoes.com. You can also follow us at Facebook, Instagram, or X for Kevlar Joe news, deals, and your daily dose of coffee-related memes, so make sure to like and follow our pages. And I'll leave you with this, listener. The world isn't a safe place right now, and it seems like it's always teetering on the edge. But don't forget, like it says in Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill and cannot be hid. Let your light shine before all men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So be bold, be humble, and be Kevlar.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that episode, I encourage you to head on over to PrometheusLensPodcast.com and sign up for our All Access Pass. It's $10 a month. It comes out to 33 cents a day. It gets you 48-hour early access to all episodes, members-only episodes, access to the private community, and that comes with monthly Q&As and member chats. So we talk with authors and other great speakers, and you guys get to ask them your questions every single month. We also offer a smaller tier package that is just $4 a month, and with that gets you access to the 48-hour early access, the monthly chats, and the Q&As. The only thing that does not get you is the members only episodes like the one you just saw. But if you enjoyed that, head on over, sign up. It's quick, it's easy, and get access to not only this episode that you just saw, but many other great exclusive content. Torch is high.